Welcome to Business Talk, a global podcast series where we bring you closer to some of the most distinguished scholars and their impactful ideas. I'm Deepak, your host from India. Imagine spending your entire career chasing one deceptively simple question: why does work matter so much to us? Not just as an economic necessity, not just as a career, but as something deeper, something that shapes how we see ourselves, how we carry stress home at night, and how we measure our own worth. That is exactly the question that has driven Dr. Scott Schieman for decades. A professor of sociology and former Canada research chair in the social context of health at the University of Toronto, Dr. Scott did not settle for theory alone. Since 2005, he went out and listened to more than 40,000 workers across the United States and Canada, building one of the most comprehensive longitudinal studies and of working life ever conducted on this continent, worker by worker, story by story, and data point by data point. And what he found was striking. Work is not just something we do, it is something that gets under our skin, shaping our identities, our stress levels, our mental health, and the very way we see the world. His findings were too important to stay inside academic journals. The New York Times, The Atlantic, Time Magazine, Harvard Business Review, Bloomberg, and the BBC all came calling because Professor Seaman had something rare: the ability to translate rigorous science into truths that every working person could recognize in their own life. Along the way, he has published over 100 peer-reviewed papers, received the prestigious Leonard I. Perlin Award for distinguished contributions to the sociological study of mental health, and earned the University of Toronto's Dean's Excellence Award every single year since joining the faculty in 2004. He also served as a co-editor of Society and Mental Health, the flagship journal of the American Sociological Association's Mental Health section. And now he has brought it together in a book, I Want More: Why Your Job Still Matters, a bold, accessible, and deeply provocative challenge to the way we think about work in a rapidly changing world. Today on Business Talk, we sit down with a scholar who has spent a lifetime studying the work we do to ask what it is really costing us and whether it is still worth it. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Scott Seaman to the podcast. Professor Scott, it's a genuine honor to have you on Business Talk. Welcome and thank you for making the time to be here with us today.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Professor, more people than ever believe a job is just a paycheck, nothing more. You clearly disagree. What is the single most important thing the transactional mindset get wrong about work?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And that's really kind of the main fundamental reason why I decided to write the book. Um, I think what has happened is increasingly people see a job as just a way of earning money, no more. And that's really risen in recent years, especially in the context of a lot more chatter about cost of living and affordability and that kind of thing. But I think what it misses and what it overlooks is all of the richness that work provides in terms of anchoring and opening the self and relating to other people, and our quest to make meaningful advances in terms of status and getting ahead in life. And so, yeah, that's what the book unpacks. It's kind of a roadmap provided by the people themselves in terms of what they get out of a job just beyond the paycheck. And the stories in the book really help provide a window into what people miss, what people overlook, but then also what a lot of people see that is actually the richness of their work.
Professor, you have spent decades studying what people think and feel about work. Was there a moment, a specific finding for a conversation with a worker that made you realize this research needed to become a book?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, in fact, one of the things that has been transformative for me is the rich qualitative storytelling that so many people have provided. I really spent most of my career doing large nationally representative surveys in the United States and Canada. And I started doing this innovative thing in my surveys, which is I asked open-ended follow-up questions, um, which allowed people to say, if they strongly agree that their job is mostly meaningless tasks, I asked why do they strongly agree, and you get a real rich uh, window into how people are thinking and feeling and the kind of words that they use. Um, for me, there wasn't really one moment, except I would say around the pandemic when the so-called Great Resignation was happening in the United States, right around 2021. When so many other things were happening. There was just a lot of negativity with phrases like, this is the age of anti-work. This is the age of anti-ambition. So a lot of observers making these claims about the culture of work that I thought were really exaggerated and overly negative, and in a way, really kind of diminished what work is for, what a job can do to us and for us. And so, yeah, to answer your question, I think the moment for me was I remember sitting around in lockdown in 2021 and thinking there needs to be a corrective, a realistic, balanced, optimistic take on work, not oh, everything's great, everybody's happy, it's totally blissful, but a real honest take on the upsides and downsides. And I think the book really does that. Again, not from my opinion or my perspective necessarily, but really from the people, even people who are quite negative about work. The book itself is really a meditation on job awareness and how job awareness connects with self-awareness. So yeah, that would probably be, if there was one point, it would probably be in 2021 where I just decided I need to write this book.
Professor, you write about mooring as the anchor of our professional identity. But in a world of layoff, gig work, and career pivots, how do people maintain a stable sense of who they are when their job itself is so unstable?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think I wouldn't argue against that. I think that people find a realization of what work provides in terms of the structure and the routine and that kind of anchoring. So I use the word mooring like you would, anchor a boat so that it doesn't drift away. And I kind of, in a sense of like just drifting away aimlessly. And yeah, work when it works, a job can really help anchor people. But as you point out, there is a lot of instability and a lot of uncertainty and insecurity. And that actually is the cornerstone of mooring, which is actually why jobs are so important, especially for younger men. Actually, this is an often overlooked point, but there's a lot of conversation about younger men feeling anchorless, rudderless, listless. And as other institutions kind of fall away, like religion, at least in Canada, for example, and then family formation, that kind of thing. Um, the kinds of things that really provide an anchoring for people, especially younger people, are really in jeopardy. And so the book really underscores a lot of people simply said to me, I need a reason to get out of bed in the morning. I need a reason to get out of the house. You'd be surprised how many people have told me they really don't have a lot to do. And so that's not work's fault. That's not a job's fault. That might be a larger societal issue, but certainly a job helps fill that void. The better stability in the job, the better the anchoring. But you're right. Yeah, there's a lot of instability. So that's a broader policy question of how societies and communities come together to really keep those anchors in place.
Dr. Scott, there is enormous cultural pressure today to find your purpose through work. Does that pressure actually help people more, or does it create a new kind of anxiety for those who never find that calling?
Yeah, it's a great question. In fact, in the introduction, I have a section on kind of on one hand, there's a heavy emphasis on money. Um, a job matters because of the money that it provides. And there's no question about that. I mean, that's a fundamental reality of life. Unless you're born into wealth, you have to earn money to pay the basic necessities of life. But on the other side, you see this kind of emphasis on meaning. I saw a sign the other day. I was walking to work, and I saw a sign that outside of a building that said, "Come inside to find meaningful work." And it was a job, a job placement center. Meaningful work is a real abstract, kind of almost squishy idea, and it puts a lot of pressure to have a meaningful, to find meaningful work. And so, actually, I want more is a map, a roadmap, or a guide really that provides a framework for the concrete metrics you can get to find that meaningful work. I basically critique this idea of it's either money or meaning. MORE is really what fills everything else in. And your question's a really good one. One of the problems that I've had is phrases like, find your dream job or follow your passion. Um, I don't have a problem with those things. I actually think, to be honest, I think ambition is probably healthy, but and hard work is certainly anchoring. But those are big, dream job. Instead of a dream job, what I try to say in the book is like, think about the specific elements that might be pleasant most of the time rather than this kind of, oh, I've got to find a dream job, or and follow your passion. Fair enough. I mean, that's good. But when I was a kid, I wanted to be a baseball player. That was my passion, and it's not going to work out. So I became a professor instead. But yeah, no, puts a lot of pressure, especially on younger people, to really find this kind of pathway. And in more, that's what I try to break that down for people in an accessible, non-academic way that lets people figure out, okay, well, passion's great, but what am I going to do to make a living and have a good life?
Professor, opening is about ability, agency, and creativity. But in highly structured workplaces, think factory floors, call centers, or rigid hierarchies, how much opening is actually possible? Is this dimension available to everyone, or is it a privilege?
Yeah, I mean, this is a struggle when you study work because there's so much variety and differentiation across different kinds of jobs. I would say first and foremost, sure, some jobs just have a lot more decision latitude or autonomy. You have a lot more voice. You have a lot more agency in some jobs. I would say, though, the one thing that has stood out to me and surprised me is how many people across the occupational spectrum talk about opening in big or small ways. I mean, again, I have something in the book that I call the principle of a little more, and it's you don't have to like have this massive self-actualization moment on the job. I mean, it can be something as simple as this job required me to learn new things or figure out how to solve problems that pushed me into a space that no one had ever pushed me into before. I often argue in the book that nothing replaces work when it comes to opening. Some people get angry with me because they say, well, what about family? Or what about volunteering? Or what about religion? It's not the same. It's not the same. Work is different. And it can be higher status jobs, white collar jobs, but also, believe it or not, and I think a lot of people don't believe it, I call it an elitist fiction in the book, that a lot of people in these kinds of jobs that you're describing still find a way to get pieces of that opening. Is it the same as a PhD who's, at a high level white collar job? Probably not, but the expectations are also different. A sanitation worker in Florida is not going to have the same expectations for um, self-understanding when it comes to work that a high-powered lawyer who works at a big firm might. At the same time, I've been surprised at how often people across different jobs and socioeconomic statuses talk about meaningful work in similar ways. So that's one of the assumptions that I could take on in the book.
Professor, many workers say they want more creative freedom, but when they get it, they feel overwhelmed. What does your
Mm.
research say about why agency can sometimes feel like a burden rather than a gift?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have this idea that I was writing and doing research on called the stress of higher status. And it really hits at your idea, which is sometimes um, as you climb up the ladder, so to speak, and you get more creativity and you get more agency and you get more autonomy, there's a stress that comes with that. There's a price to pay for that. And I mentioned lawyers before. That's why you get a lot of workers who are like, it's a lot of lawyers that say, it's not worth it. I'm not sure this is really worth it. And that worth it is, the higher status, not necessarily the creativity, but the other elements that you're talking about. Like, okay, I have a lot of decision latitude. I have a lot of authority over other people. But that's the kind of stuff that's keeping me up at night. That's the kind of stuff that's causing a lot of work to home conflict. That Sunday afternoon that you wanted to spend with your family might get drained by requirements from a high-powered client, and especially when you're on an international clock, right? If you're not, it's not necessarily your same time zone. The creativity piece is interesting because creativity has that self-enhancing kind of more fulfillment aspect to it. But the downside of creativity probably comes with a bit more of responsibilities for successes and failures. Again, not a bad thing, but if a lot is on the line, then that could really take a toll on mental health. And so I would say when it comes to creative work or challenging work, um, where there's a lot of requirements to learn new things, to solve problems, and work with other people, and especially manage other people, that's where you get a lot of that, what I call sort of status blowback, which is the stressful side of going up the ladder, so to speak.
Professor, respect sits at the heart of relating. In your research across 40,000 workers, what was the most surprising thing you found about what workers actually mean when they say they do not feel respected at work?
Yeah, and this is in the book. I have these ideas, what I call loops, which is like, so it's not just M and O and R and E, mooring, opening, relating, and exceeding, as if they're in different lanes. Respect is an interesting one because respect also connects to exceeding. Respect is about status and recognition and reputation, but it's also, as you said, really deeply related to connecting with other people. And actually, respect is a big part of getting work done, especially when you have to work with other people. If other people don't respect you, they're not going to necessarily believe you're competent. They're not necessarily going to follow your authority. And so it's a big, big component. I'd also say that the upsides of respect flow from recognition, which is you did a good job, we're respecting you for that job. And we see you, this phrase kept coming up over and over again in my interviews and surveys. Um, Other people saw me as the go-to person. We need something done on the job. You're the go-to person, or we were the go-to people. That means like we have a problem, we're gonna go, we're gonna go to this person, and that's a sign of respect. That's a sign of recognition. And again, you could think of that as anchoring too, because it's like, oh, I matter in this world. I matter to my family. I'm the go-to dad. I'm in the community, I'm the go-to person, but at work, I'm also seen as somebody that has something to offer. And people that I talked to who had retired said they felt better about retiring because of this aspect of respect and legacy, actually, they called it, which is I knew I was leaving something behind. Again, It's not like I changed the world. I solved, I solved some disease or, cancer or anything like that. But I moved the dial in some small way, and that mattered. And it connects back to relating also because respect and recognition have deeply social and human elements to them. AI, I can chat with Claude or AI in the morning. It's not going to respect me. It's going to give me some answers that I might need. I still got to use my own brain to figure it out. But the real human side of what we're about, and I close the book on this, so I really do a deep dive into why your job still matters. It is that human side of relating to other people, respecting other people, and honestly, recognition. A final thought on this: when I ask people what they got over their career or in their working life, what was it that they got a little more of that made a big difference? And recognition was the number one answer. Not money, not, power. It was recognition. And again, the key point here is a little, not like you won the gold prize, but you got a little recognition. Now, to be fair, some of that does come with a bonus, right? Money is often kind of in the background on a lot of things. Doesn't hurt to get a little more money, but recognition and respect, which kind of goes hand in hand, those two really go together.
Professor, the rise of remote and hybrid work has fundamentally changed how people connect with colleagues. Based on your framework, is relating harder to sustain a distributed workplace? And what can workers and leaders do about it?
Yeah, this is a really big part of what I wrote about in the book. In addition to people being laid off, there were these fundamental, massive societal restructuring with working from home. So about 30 to 40%, 35% of workers can do some or most or all of the work at home. And so when the pandemic hit and lockdowns happened, people shifted to working from home. And in a lot of my interviews, some people love it, love it, love it, love it. Because it's more autonomy, it's more freedom. They can stay in their pajamas. They don't have to, they don't have to get ready. They don't have to commute. People hate in Toronto here, the commute is awful. However, the big downside is the lack of connection with other people. And where you see this right now, I'm doing interviews right now for my second book, which is about how people in their 20s in the pandemic, especially early 20s, how they feel about getting ahead and getting ahead in life. And a lot of them say, I've never worked in an office. I came right out of school and I've worked from home. And they love it. They say they love it, but then when you push, they know they're missing something. They know they're missing out. Connecting with people on Zoom or on, through is very different, than if you are in a workplace. Does that mean you have to be in a workplace all the time? Again, we kind of swing these all or nothing ideas, but I think I've sort of actually thought from the beginning, from 2021, 2020, I was doing I was doing writing about this that I had a sense that this whole work from home revolution was going to take a toll on social connection, and that we should be careful about how much we underestimate the power of relating to each other. Um, but I'll tell you, like it doesn't make a lot of. Some people really love work and or they really love working from home and they're strong advocates for it. And they say that the emphasis on connection and relating is overstated. So that it's a really good question because it's yet another polarizing aspect of society where you got, the other thing is, I'll just say quickly here, people who live alone, who have a small place, wake up, work at the kitchen table, eat at the kitchen table. They don't have a lot of places to go. A bad day at work is a bad day at home. And you do get some people that really have difficulty with that. They miss other people. Introverts surprisingly said to me, wow, I didn't realize how much I missed other people. And so look, a lot of this can be overstated, so I want to be careful about that. But I'd say one of the biggest things that's come out of my book is relating, and the human connection is the one thing, especially with AI, that we're going to need to hold on to. And I think that's a special space for us to really explore. And we have to be mindful of younger people. They need the socialization. The socialization is not happening. I teach young ones, and it's not, where does it happen? It happens in workspaces. And it can happen over Zoom, but I think the question of whether it's as effective is open for debate.
Professor, exceeding is about recognition and status, but chasing status is also one of the biggest sources of workplace stress your research identifies. How do you help readers pursue recognition without letting it consume them?
Yeah, this is a, it's a tough question. Um, it's a seductive power, wanting to climb the ladder and succeed. But when I wrote about the stress of higher status many, many years ago, it came out of a fundamental finding, which is, in my research, I was showing that people who gained more job authority, that is, more power over other people, authority is classically seen as better, higher status, but they weren't getting health benefits from it. They were actually, part of that is because of this I call it a countervailing mechanism, which is too academic, but it's basically like, to put it in blunt terms, you climb up the ladder, but when you put your hand on that next rung of the ladder, there's more pressing down on that hand. And that suppresses or counteracts the good stuff. So yeah, okay, more power, more prestige, longer hours, more expectations. When I became chair of my department, I didn't want to become chair. I was asked to do it. It was one of the most stressful periods of my life. I was also pretty young, so a lot of colleagues were much older, which is a different dynamic altogether. But you have to deal with other people's problems when you have higher status. And you might not find a lot of support for that. You have to figure it out on your own. So there is a bit of selection here, right? Because some people really are like, well, I want this higher status. I can handle it. I'm hardy. I'm tough. But it still takes a toll. So I would say, to answer your question, um, it's a real delicate balance of figuring out how much you feel you can manage and handle, and be really clear-eyed about what higher status means. It doesn't always work out that, okay, more money, more problems, how much of that are you willing to take on? And some people draw the line around work-family conflict. They're not going to let work interfere with their family life constantly. They'll allow it somewhat, but they're not going to allow it continuously. And so, yeah, that's exceeding. In the book, I have stories about that where people wrestle with this. There's a great story from a man who said, his boss, his wife was having their second child, and he wanted to leave to be with her. And the boss was like, you need to do these other things. You're higher up, you need to do these other things. And he was just like, no, that's not going to happen. And so he made those choices, but that meant not getting as high of promotion, higher income, that kind of thing. And as he put it, I don't need a yacht to be happy. I don't need a big boat to be happy. I can be happy with what I have. And so that's where you get this phrase of, like, I would say the number one phrase that comes up with stress of higher status is, it's not worth it. And that it is the demands, the stressors, that come with higher status. So that's really everybody's individual choice about making a decision of what it is that is worth it.
Professor Scott, I would like to conclude this episode with one last question. If a listener today feels completely disconnected from their work, going through the motions, collecting a paycheck, feeling invisible, where is the more framework would you tell them to start? And what is the first concrete step they can take tomorrow morning?
Yeah, I would say honestly that mooring is probably the best place to start. But the book, I think the book is going to appeal to readers in different ways, right? Like people keep saying, "Well, who is your book for? Who is your book for?" And I think it's for the reader. I think it's for the reader that you mentioned, which is the person who's trying to figure out what the role of work is in their life. And I think starting with mooring and especially the question about self-understanding. There's a question that I have in the book about how much does your work help you understand the kind of person you really are? And again, even the people that say a little, and then they explore why, and I write about that in the book, it really nudges people, it pushes people in a more positive way. And so I think for the kind of reader that you're talking, the kind of worker, the kind of worker or listener that you're referring to, I think could get a lot out of the book if they started with some of those fundamentals. And even before you get to the M, the introduction really lays out again what I call the principle of a little more. And I write about people just like the worker that you mentioned, who are really negative, who have a really, their work is boring and routine and they don't feel valued. But after MORE framework, after being exposed to that, a lot of people said it changed the way that I thought and felt about what I was doing for a living. Sometimes better, sometimes worse, but it also helped people realize what they valued and what I call intangible assets, those things that they're getting from their job that even if they lose their job tomorrow, or even if they leave their job to find something else, those things go with them. And so that's what I mean by the intangible assets. But I would start with the M. And in fact, I think if you read the introduction, my sense is over the years, the people that I've talked to uh, feel better when they allow themselves to have greater job awareness. And I think that's why I wrote the book is we talk about self-awareness all the time, but a lot of us are spending about a third of our lives in work. So that there's a clear pathway between job awareness and self-awareness. So that's what I would encourage, yeah, a worker who's feeling like that. No, like I think the most powerful chapter is probably relating because that's where you get the social. People say, um, when I ask, what would you miss most if work suddenly disappeared? Um, it puts them into a kind of like a almost a hypothetical framework in their mind. And most people say the social, some aspect of the people. And so that that's also a bit refreshing because people, even even people who again aren't that social themselves realize how important it is.
Professor Scott Schieman, this has been a truly enriching conversation. You have given us not just as a framework, but a new lens through which to see our work and ourselves. I Want More is not just a book, it is an invitation to pause, reflect, and reclaim the meaning we bring to what we do every day. To our listeners, whether you are a student, a professional, or a leader, I hope today's conversation plants a seed. Thank you, Professor Seaman, for your time, your research, and your generosity in sharing it with us here on Business Talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.